Good afternoon, everybody. Another beautiful day. So we finish up the Upanishads today, and we're going to read the Śvetāśvatara, the sort of white horse, the Śvetāśva. Shveta is white and Ashva is a horse. So no one's quite particularly sure why. Perhaps it's to do with the ancient ritual where horses were sacrificed. We don't know exactly why it's called that. But this is going to be the strongest theistic, monotheistic. Theism is belief in God, Ishvara, but monotheism is a stronger term. They overlap. Perhaps sometimes they're used synonymously, theism and monotheism. But when you use the term monotheism, you're really emphasizing that supreme being is very much one and single. So let's kick off. I'll bring up the text. I'm getting quite good at this. And there it is, Śvetāśvatara. So we'll push this up here and let's just read, okay? So the fact that there is a strong theism in this Upanishad, some scholars, historical, text critical scholars, like to think of the Upanishads as evolving over time, the Brihad being the oldest and the Śvetāśvatara later Upanishads, by which time theism was more prominent in the Indian subcontinent. So clearly an academic way of looking at the text is that they're human products, they're constructed by humans. And they would certainly not see that the Upanishads as a unitary, that, sort of articulated by one person, but sages over the centuries, and therefore there are differences and different points of view expressed in these Upanishads. Maybe they're compiled at a certain point and become fossilized from that point onwards. But scholars would tend to be interested in the historical development. So they would tend to see the Shveta, which is the short way of saying Śvetāśvatara, as a later Upanishad. Now, keep in mind, tradition doesn't see it this way. Vedanta tradition, Orthodox Hinduism, these are not human constructs. They're not written by humans over the centuries. They're eternal divine texts. Now, even within tradition, there's a difference. Are the texts eternal because they're spoken by Ishvara at the beginning of each creative cycle, eternal in that sort of a way, but nonetheless emanating from Ishvara, God? Or the Mimamsa school, the really super orthodox ritualist school, they're not even comfortable with the idea of Ishvara, even if Ishvara is a perfect being. They're not happy with the idea of the Vedas coming into being at any point, even if they come into being by coming out of the mouth and the mind of Ishvara. They're still not content with that. They want the Vedas to be eternal, with no author whatsoever. So they take that position. So the tradition does not see these as human constructs and or created. And why not? And that would be Purushaya. Purushaya means written by humans. And what's the problem with that? Well, humans are imperfect. So if you want to approach the text and present the text and relate to the text as perfect, then it can't be articulated by human. And that would be the case with any religion. Think of the Quran. Muslims believe that it's spoken by the angel Gabriel. It comes from God and it's parted by God. And okay, Gabriel is not God, but he's a superhuman. He's a perfect being. And of course, Christians, like to think of the New Testament and the teachings there as spoken by Jesus, who is God in, the Son of God, God in flesh. So this is not an unusual thing. If you're going to have a religious scripture and you want to present it as perfect, then you're not going to be you're not going to be comfortable with the idea that it was written by a human. So the Upanishads then, so the Śvetāśvatara is sort of considered by scholars a later text, by tradition as just one Upanishad within the eternal Upanishads. But it starts off in a very interesting note. What is the cause of Brahman? Now, up to now, Brahman is the cause of all causes. Cause of all causes. Right? Because something could be the cause of something else, but it itself could be caused by something greater than it. So for example, I don't know, you could say water, ice you could say steam. Oh, I don't know, but something could. I was going to say you could say steam is caused by water, but then water itself is caused by the coming together, let's say, of hydrogen and oxygen molecules. So you couldn't say water is the cause of all causes. It might be the cause of steam, but it itself has finer causes. So when we speak of the cause of all causes, we mean there's a stop sign. You can't go further back. Otherwise, you have an infinite regress. This is caused by this is caused by this is caused by this, and you go back eternally, and you never get to a stop sign. And Buddhism would take a position like that, but not so the Ishvara traditions, and not so the Vedanta. For them, Brahman is the cause of all causes. But here we says the question is, what's the cause of Brahman? So now that's an unusual question given all of the teachings we've had so far. Why were we born? So these are the basic, fundamental existential questions that thinking humans have asked since recorded history. And what distinguishes a human from an animal in Vedanta yogic philosophy? Otherwise, we're the same as animals in many ways. But we have senses, we engage in sensual experiences, we sleep, we mate, we have our, mating rituals, we have residences. So maybe the humans are far more embellished in those basic functions, right? We sleep in fancy apartments, we have makeup and all kinds of complicated mating protocols, or dating, romance, all of that. Our food may be far more elaborate, and so forth, and defense. That's the other one of the four things: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. We may have elaborate nuclear weaponry rather than claws and teeth, but basic functions are the same. So what's the difference then? Other than one is more embellished than the other? Well, this. The humans can ask these kinds of questions. Why were we born? By what do we live? What sustains us? And what are we established? What is the ultimate support of everything? By whom? Oh, you who know Brahman, ha ha ha, you Vedanta people, you yogis in the forest, oh, you claim to know Brahman. By who do we live in pleasure and pain? Why are we happy and then sad, and then why do we go up? Why do we experience these the gamut of emotions that we are subject to? Each in our respective situation. Why are you there and I'm over here? Why were you, someone born in India, someone born in America, someone born in England? These are our respective situations. Should be regarded as time? Is it just time? Is it just movement of things? It's just inherent nature? Is it just the nature, prabhava, right? Just the nature of things, Big Bang, just was, explodes, and then things spin, and forces and subatomic particles, they just are. We don't have to probe anything deeper. Is it just the inherent nature of things to come together in the world that we experience? Was it necessity, some kind of fate? Is that what it is? Is it chance, just a fluke, a subatomic molecule, using language of physics? But they believed in it. They understood atoms back 2,000 years ago. Is it just the chance that the atoms come together and form objects of the world? Is it the elements? Is it the the great elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, as the source of birth? Or is it the person, capital B, Purusha, the supreme being? Or is it a combination of these? But that can't be, because there is the Atman. Okay, even the Atman is not in control, because it itself is subject to pleasure and pain. We could say, well, we have consciousness, so we're somehow supreme, and we're somehow in control of our environment, and we're sort of the apex of creation, but we ourselves are subject. I didn't choose to have bad eyesight, did I? So we're subject to conditions beyond our control. Those who follow the discipline of meditation have seen God. My friends, let's be clear about this. The goal of meditation isn't just a belief system. It isn't just to sort of make the mind calm. That may be a byproduct, but the goal is to perceive, whether it's the Atman or God. This is both. This text accepted both, two different things. Just like Christianity, there's a soul, there's a God. In many Hindu traditions, there's a soul and there's God. There's Atman and Ishvara, and some, of course, the soul is God. Remember Advaita Vedanta. Keep repeating. So, you hear it enough, and it slowly makes sense. Advaita Vedanta would say there's no, there may be a God conventionally, but ultimately you are that God. Then of course, Advaita Vedanta has to answer, Well, why, if you're God, are you subject to pleasure and pain in the previous line? That's a problem for Advaita Vedanta. But nonetheless, they would say, Advaita Vedanta would say, the highest reality, there is no distinction between anything. In lower reality, we can talk about creation and God and souls, but these are superimposed and ultimate reality. It's just Brahman. Anyway, all of these questions are being raised. So clearly, different thinkers were representing these different views. It wasn't just one view in ancient, even within the Upanishads, there's different views, different sages. Vedanta, that we turn to next, acknowledges different views, different thinkers. Never static, or in some ways far more flexible. For example, if you have in Christianity, you have a pope. In Catholicism, and the pope determines dogma. And maybe flexibility within that, but there's much more of a, one God, one Bible, one prophet, nothing wrong with that. But if you don't have that, don't have a figurehead like a pope, imagine the degree of variegatedness and variety. So I'm not saying that Christianity isn't variegated. There's many, many forms of Christianity, many, many forms that still lay claim to a relationship with the Bible and Jesus Christ. And it's true also that Hinduism does have a kind of anchor, not quite the same. It's not a person. It's a body of text, which means already there's flexibility within the texts. So here we see some of that flexibility. So those who follow the discipline of meditation, yoga, have seen God, the self, and they've also seen the self, two different things. The power of creation, prakriti, Maya, all hidden by their own qualities. Atman is hidden, our Atman is hidden by our bodies and mind. God is hidden by his powers, and the true nature of reality is hidden. Even physicists would say, well, what we see is not real. What's real is subatomic particles and gravitational, nuclear, and those kinds of forces. We're not actually seeing reality. We see things as if they're solid substances, but really it's a whizzing around of particles. So that's not controversial. They're all hidden by their own qualities. One alone, this is monotheism. One alone is he who governs all these causes from time to self. So all these other possible causes, there may be causes in a secondary way, but then there's the cause of all causes. Verse 3, verse 4, we're at verse 3. One alone, he who governs all those causes. Okay? So let's go down because we don't have time to read every single verse. Within this vast wheel of Brahman, verse 6, on which all subsist. Should we make this bigger? We could make this a little bit bigger, perhaps. Make it 125. You could be following along on your own text, but let's make this bigger. How about that? We can even make it, yeah, that's good enough. Okay, so down here at the bottom, within this vast wheel of Brahman, a wheel of Brahman in the sense that everything is churning and revolving, contained within Brahman, on which all subsist, animate and inanimate, and which abides in all. Somehow Brahman pervades everything. The goose keeps moving around. Now, some or other, that, for reasons we'll never know, but it's not just here. The Atman is referred to as a goose. It could be because, I don't know, elsewhere there's references to the Paramahamsa, the supreme goose. The Paramahamsa is somebody who's a supreme goose, and in those references, there's this idea that the goose, or we might say a swan, if you mix milk and water, the swan can just suck out the milk and leave the water. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's that's what's said about the swan in India. So it could be that the enlightened yogi can separate the real from the false, can distinguish the Atman from the non-Atman. So maybe that's why the metaphor of a goose. I haven't found any better explanation than that one, but a goose keeps moving around. And by the way, when you do get explanations of why a goose, those explanations are going to come a good 1,000 years later. First commentary we have on this would be 8th, 9th century Shankara. That's 1,000 years after it was written. So, I mean, we accept tradition. We can sort of honor the great commentators. But if someone were to ask you, how do you know Shankara even knows what a goose is? Well, you'd have a problem answering that question. You would just say, well, he's closer in the tradition. You could say that. You could say, well, he's probably receiving, definitely receiving the teachings from older lineages which haven't survived, which didn't leave any literary record. You could definitely say that. You could make a case. But if someone wanted to take a real cynical position, you know, how do we know Shankara has got it right? And other commentators will disagree with Shankara just 100 years later. So it doesn't matter. There's a goose. It's clearly got some. It is the Atman. That there's no question about that. But why a goose? We can, you know, we have the idea of the swan separating milk from water. That's an explanation. There may be others. When this Atman perceives himself as distinct from the impeller, Shankara is not going to like this too much. The Atman is distinct from God. Who's going to like this? We're going to read 2 Vedantins next week. Shankara we've introduced. His school is called Advaita, non-dual. 100 years later, Ramanuja, the great theologian thinker, his school is going to be Vishishta Advaita. He keeps the Advaita notice. He says, yeah, everything is one because everything is God and there's nothing separate from God. But Vishishta, there's differences in it, eternal differences. What are those differences? God, the soul, and the world. And a Christian would agree with that. A Muslim would agree with that. You could say it's all one, but the soul isn't God. It always, maybe it's a spark. It has some qualities of God. Like man is made in the image of God. Most Christians would say that represents, you know, man has reason, man and woman. But there's a distinction. It would be a heresy to say we're God. And certainly in Islam, historically, some of the mystical Islamic traditions have made those kinds of claim. An al-Haq, I am God. Didn't go down well in their in particular mainstream context. So this is this idea that here's clearly a dualism, or at least a differentiated non-dualism. Get used to that term. Differentiated non-dualism. That's Ramanuja. Vishishta, differentiated, non-dualism, Advaita. Okay, one more time. Non-dualism, why? Because everything's God. But there's differences. Vishishta, differentiation between the soul and God and the world. We gave the example of the sun and the sunlight. Okay, they're one, but there's a difference at the same time. Sunlight is here on my arm. The sun, so the sun isn't. But there's a difference and a oneness. It's nothing. It's not sort of a koan, or it's not something, you know, mysterious. It's just the way things are. The sun is, on one hand, it's the same as the light and heat, but it also has an aspect that's different. So the highest Brahman, hang on, when he perceives himself, the yogi, as distinct from the impeller, the cause of all causes that impels everything, that is underneath everything, delighted by that knowledge of that distinction, he goes from there to immortality. This is kind of early bhakti. It's bhakti, you delight in worshipping and adoring God as distinct. In our other course, we're reading Krishna. It's the whole life and story of Krishna. Some of you are interested in that. We can give you access to the videos. You can just download them for free. The highest Brahman, however, has been extolled thus, meaning in the past, been handed down in the following way. How has it been extolled? There is a triad in it, 3 things: oneself, the foundation, and the imperishable. This sounds like Ramanuja. There's 3, there's God, the soul, and the world. That's a triad. Here it's phrased a little bit differently. You could take one of these as God and one of these as matter. Maybe the foundation is matter and imperishable is God and oneself. When those who know Brahman have come to know the distinction, this is a dualistic text. Remember the Chandogya with the rivers flowing into the ocean, they become one with the ocean. That's more monistic. That's more merging. Shankara likes that. Those passages he quotes Mahavakya, his great, he quotes them more than anything else, the great saying, Tattvamasi, that's what you are that Brahman. That's one of Shankara's 4 great Mahavakyas. I think we spoke about them in a previous workshop. Great sayings that capture the sort of essence or an essential truth about a system of knowledge. So those who know Brahman have come to know the distinction between them. They become absorbed in and totally intent on Brahman and are freed from the womb. They become absorbed in, but they don't lose their distinction. You can be absorbed in thinking of God, but you don't necessarily merge into God, right? You know that. You can be absorbed in thinking of someone, your beloved. You don't merge. So being absorbed in is the goal of meditation. You absorb the mind in something. And in bhakti, devotional meditation, the theistic, our course is on God, so theism. So the yoga traditions that are connected to that tend to be bhakti traditions, many of them. So what's the goal of bhakti? Devotion. Bhakti means devotion to a distinct being, to Ishvara, Bhagavan. Well, same term, Ishvara. Bhagavan will encounter that in the Bhagavad Gita. That's Bhagavan, the Gita, Bhagavan. It's just the same. Ishvara, there are nuances of difference, but for now, we'll just say Ishvara, Bhagavan, same thing. Bhagavan is Ishvara when Ishvara manifests form and qualities. We could still call him Bhagavan, but we could also call him, we could still call him Ishvara, but we could call him Bhagavan. But when we use the term Bhagavan, it means Shiva, Vishnu, Durga, Devi, the goddess. Is that divine manifested form? Remember, not polytheism, but the one can take on any form. So there can be an infinity of forms. God is infinite knowledge, right? We like to think of God as omniscient, infinite knowledge, infinite power, omnipotent. Well, how about infinitely beautiful, infinite forms? That's a very necessary condition for God in the bhakti traditions. That God must be infinitely beautiful, and beauty is represented in form. And form is not a limitation because there's infinite forms, and they can manifest and disappear at will. So this whole world is the perishable and imperishable. So imperishable is the Atman, perishable is matter. The manifest and the unmanifest join together. Manifest is the world we see, unmanifest is the Atman. These are just synonyms for each other. And the Lord bears it. He's the third. There's the Atman, there's the world, and the Lord who bears it, supports it, sustains it, pervades it, upholds it. While the self Atman, who is not the Lord, not the Lord, not the Lord. This is not Advaita Vedanta. You have to work very hard. I mean, Shankara does work very hard, and he does find a way. He has to. The Upanishads are eternal truth. Shankara can't reject them. Can't say, oh, I'm just going to, I accept the Brihadaranyaka and the Chandogya. I reject the Śvetāśvatara. It's got it wrong. It's too theistic. Can't say that as a Vedanta. You have to accept the whole corpus, whole body of Upanishadic material. So you have to work hard to make this work, and he does. Shankara will say, well, whenever the personal, the soul merging, Brahman is impersonal, the world is unreal, and the rivers go to the sea and merge, so does the soul. When they speak like that, the Upanishads are talking from highest reality, ultimate reality, and he calls it Paramarthika. And he says, but because we're in ignorance and we're not so smart, we're covered by delusion, and it seems to us that the world is real, and it seems to us that we are individual. It seems that there must be a creator. So on that lower level, Vyavaharika, then we could talk about distinctions and souls and worlds. And he says the Upanishads speak on both levels. So whenever they say things like this, the other is not the Lord, for Shankara, oh, it's not. It's just talking about the lower level. A very ingenious way of reconciling everything, and that's what an exegete must do. That's what a Vedanta commentator must do. Let's make it all work together because they're perfect texts. You can't say, no, this particular passage is wrong. You can't say there's a typo. You can't say, anything other than it's perfect and divine, and therefore we have to try and find a way of making it all fit together, even though some passages are monistic and some are monotheistic. Monistic, or one, monotheistic, or one God, but distinct from the world and distinct from the souls. Okay, we'll talk more about that as we go along. So the one who is not the Lord remains bound. That's you and me. So one feature everybody accepts about Ishvara is not bound by karma, by reincarnation, by any of the laws we're bound by the limitations of a body, have to eat, have to go to the bathroom, those kinds of limitations. I mean, Ishvara may assume a body, but just out of play, not being forced to it. Not forced to. Krishna steals butter. He likes to eat butter. Doesn't mean he's really needs butter to survive. Of course not. He does that just to give joy to his bhaktas, just to please his devotees. We're very far away from thinking of Ishvara in those categories. That comes at the end of the semester, my friends. Right now, we're just looking at the earliest origins of theism. So when he comes to know God, he's freed from all fetters. What are the fetters? Karma. What's karma? Every action I do when I'm in ignorance. Ignorance means what? That I think I'm body-mind. What's wrong with thinking of body-mind? Well, I'm an Atman, not body-mind. Body-mind, body dies. Mind changes, and consciousness is distinct from the mind. Your mind is just an instrument. So then whenever we act under that avidya, ignorance of the real self, everything we do creates just cause and effect. It's one of Newton's laws of physics pertaining to matter. Why? Well, the Indians would agree with Newton, but they would just say it applies to all reality, not just matter. It applies to human behavior. Definitely, it's not a belief. For them, it's an observation. Everything we see is cause and effect. So it's an induction, actually. Everything we see, all men are mortal. Well, all men, like the Greek philosophers would say. And if Socrates is a man, why do we say all men are mortal? Because everywhere we see men and women die, granddad, great granddad, animals. So all men are mortal. If that's true, then if Socrates is a man, Socrates is mortal. So the ancient Indian thinker looking out says, well, everything is cause and effect, chemistry, biology, maybe even quantum mechanics, we don't know yet. This wave particle business. It's also governed on a deep level in ways that we've yet to discover by cause and effect. So why should human behavior be any different? Why should it be an exception? So these are the fetters. You act, you get a reaction. But why a fetter? Well, you're bound to that reaction. You're bound to it. It may not come in this life. It might come in the next life, but you're bound to it. It's a bond. It's a fetter. Bandhana in Sanskrit. There are two unborn males. The one who knows and the other is ignorant. The one is the Lord and the other is not the Lord. Remember the two birds in the Śvetāśvatara. Actually, we're going to find the same metaphor here. So there's God. And then there's us, we're ignorant of ourselves, ignorant that there's a God. There's just one unborn female, that's nature, prakriti, matter, who is joined to the enjoyer and objects of enjoyment. So there's a triad. Remember he said there's a triad, there's three distinct things. And then there is the self, limitless and displaying every form, not engaged in any activity. That one doesn't do anything. It's just consciousness. It supplies consciousness like a battery in a toy. It doesn't do anything. It just supplies energy. The toy moves, and any piece of equipment that's run by a battery does the moving and the action. The battery does nothing other than just be. And it's part of its being, part of its nature is it emanates power. Just is that it comes that way. It's inherent nature. So the Atman's like that. It manifests consciousness, but it doesn't do anything. The doing is done by the body, the mind. These are all instruments. The mind thinks, processes, obtains information, and so forth. All right. When someone finds these three, not one, not mono, more like Ramanuja's Vishishta Advaita, but Vishishta, differences within the oneness. When he finds these three, he finds Brahman. The primal source is perishable, while Hara is immortal, imperishable. Now, Hara is the name of Shiva. The term Shiva does not occur in this Upaniṣad, but terms that, but Shiva has many names, and one is Hara and one is Rudra, and both of those occur here. So therefore, it's considered a Shaivite Upaniṣad. Of course, you're always going to find some scholar saying, well, how do we know that this early period that Hara and Rudra really referred to Shiva? We don't know that. Maybe it was, scholars do that. What are you going to do? Just say namaskar. You say, well, that sounds very interesting, and then just change the subject. But mostly, certainly tradition considers this to be Shiva. All right. So Hara is immortal and imperishable. Shiva. So there are two great beings, two great Ishvaras throughout Indian tradition, Shiva and Vishnu. And the previous Upanishad, I should have actually, I didn't realize I hadn't included that. It's just one verse about Vishnu being the Parapadam, Parampadam, the supreme destination, the cause of all causes, the ultimate destination, the Padam. So both Vaishnava and Shaiva traditions, the Vaishnava connected to Vishnu, Shaiva connected to Shiva, have their roots in the Upanishads. Now again, how is there two? Remember, monotheism. Well, both of them say that there's ultimately one being, but then manifests other beings. Just like a Catholic would say is God the Father, and then manifests God the Son, and the three in one. Say Christians would accept that, 3 in 1, at least Catholics would. So what's, if there's 3 in 1, why not have an infinity in 1? 3 is a small number, isn't it, for God? Why not have an infinity of manifestations? Not polytheism. Polytheism is when they're independent and equal, or mostly equal. Maybe one is a little tougher, like Zeus, can kick butt better than the others, but mostly equal. That's polytheism. No. Monotheism is one, not all just a bunch of individuals. One, but that one becomes multiple. So what's the difference between Vaishnavism and Shaivism? Well, Shaivism says Shiva is the one, and Vishnu is manifest from Shiva, is secondary derivative. And Vaishnavas would say the other way around. They say, yes, we accept Shiva, but Shiva is not the cause of all causes. He's secondary and derivative. That's the only difference. And they both have their roots here. And here's Shiva's, the roots of the Shaiva tradition right here. Hara is immortal and imperishable. The one God, here one, monotheism, rules over both the perishable and the Atman. By meditating on him, by striving towards him, and further in the end, by becoming the same reality as him. That doesn't mean merging. Later Shaiva traditions, Shaiva Siddhanta, are going to talk about, the divine realm of Shiva, where you have form, just like Shiva, but always a distinction. Shaivism actually divides into 2 streams, major streams. One is monotheistic and one is monistic. Kashmir Shaivism is monistic, but let's not complicate things at this point. Okay, but all I'm saying is becoming the same reality doesn't necessarily mean merging. This is very much a dualistic text. All illusions disappear. When one has known God, all the fetters, that's karma, all the karma that you have is stored, we have stored. It's not going to fit in this life. We don't know how much karma we have in our storage, in our arshaya, our storage containers. But that all gets burnt. Krishna says the fire of knowledge, it burns it. So when one has known, all the fetters fall off, no more karma. By the eradication of the blemishes, the ignorance, ego, I am this body and mind and I'm great, and all of this sort of thinking, birth and death come to an end. What binds us to samsara is, I think I'm body mind, I seek happiness through my body mind, I act in the world trying to fulfill desires, every action has a reaction, now I'm bound. I do that for my whole life, and I make an infinite number of reactions. Some of them fit into this life, most of them don't. Next life, when I die, I have to come back and get all the reactions. And when the reactions come to me, I react to them, I respond to them, I create another whole generation of karma. And it goes on like a cycle. That's why they call it an ocean. Ocean is infinite. How deep is an ocean? Who can conceive of how deep the ocean is, especially before submarines? So, all the blemishes, by the eradication. How do we eradicate them? By meditating on God, Ishvara, Rudra, Hara. By striving towards him, by committing our intention. This is what I want to do with my life. I want to seek God. I want to understand my Atman, but over and above that, God. And further, in the end, by becoming the same reality, by recognizing an ultimate spiritual nature. All illusion disappears. This is how the illusion of the blemishes, the same thing. Illusion is just another expression of the blemishes. By the eradication of the blemishes, birth and death come to an end. By meditating on him, one obtains at the dissolution of the body a third sovereignty over all, and in the absolute, one's desires are fulfilled. What does that mean? Different sects are going to take that differently. Some sects are going to say you get a divine body just like God's, but not quite the same, because you can't create a universe, and God can, but you attain an amazing divine body, the same reality, not made of matter, my friends, not made of flesh and blood, made of pure consciousness. Satchidananda Brahman. Remember what is Brahman? Satchidananda, eternal, sort of a state of eternal being, and Chit, conscious eternal being, and Ananda, blissful conscious eternal being. Sat Chit Ananda. We looked at the Taittiriya, remember? We didn't find quite the same words, but that language becomes prominent in Vedanta. The Brahman is Sat Chit Ananda. So by meditating on God, striving, then all that karma is destroyed, ignorance is destroyed. What the yoga is going to call the kleshas, 5 kleshas: ignorance, ego, desire, aversion, clinging to life. Okay, this can be known for abide within one's body. We can know our own Atman because we're conscious. We know that much. You may say, well, I don't know if consciousness is something separate. That, the big topic in the study of religion, right? Is consciousness some a property of a different kind of substance? It's not material. Completely different kind of substance that's beyond the range of science and instrumentation to perceive. Well, that's been the position traditionally, even in the history of science. Now, last few decades, that's been challenged. Scientists may say, well, we have no reason, we can come up with other ways of explaining, but it's just they're replacing one faith system for another faith system. If you start saying consciousness, oh, well, we think we can explain it materially, it's neuron, but what's a neuron? Or a combination of neurons. Nothing other than atoms. A neuron isn't a combination of those atoms. And what are those? Combinations of subatomic, electrons. And what are those? And you go deeper and deeper. So you're basically saying that consciousness comes from some combination of particles and forces. Well, if that's the case, then you can produce it. You can identify which subatomic entities cause consciousness, as opposed to the subatomic entities in my shirt, which don't cause consciousness. Then identify it. And if you can't do that, what have you done? You've just replaced one faith for another. You just say, well, we believe that one day we will find this. Well, good luck then. Keep looking, but don't present that as a scientific fact. Just take that, present it as a belief, and nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong. Science, the dharma of science, the duty of science is to seek material causation. It has to try to find a material cause. I'm not criticizing that. You have to look for material cause, right? You can't say, the weather is it's rainy today because the rain gods are angry. Of course not. You have to find causes in the atmosphere. You can't say, well, I'm sick because I got cursed by a witch. No, you have to find material causation. So there's nothing wrong with looking for material causation for consciousness. That is the dharma. But you can't then mix up science and metaphysics. When you start saying consciousness is material, is nothing other than we can explain the phenomenon of the quality, the qualia, it's called, that sense of experience. We can explain that through material causation. That's just a belief. It's never been demonstrated. And Vedanta and yoga would say it never can be, because it isn't a material. The consciousness is not emanating from any material entities and forces coming together. It is nothing other. It is a separate substance. And science could get to a point where it could actually, an honest scientist could say, okay, we've looked for it for 50 years. We'll keep looking for it, but probably we're never going to find it within our sphere of science. So therefore, we'll give it back to the theologians. Let's give it back to the philosophers. Let's give it back to the metaphysicians. And then people might go back to their old ancient spiritual texts like the Upanishads and take them more seriously. And I'm hoping I'll be alive when that happens. But if not, so there we are. So this can be known, but not by, the problem is it can be known, in that sense it's scientific, but it can never be duplicated for somebody else. And that's what makes it different from scientific modes of hypothesis verification and experimentation and verification, right? Hypothesis, experimentation. So those two bits in yogic is, yogic practices, hypothesis and experimentation, and there is verification for you personally. With science, which requires verification for an external body of observers. So that part, yoga can never provide. It can just say, well, okay, you all you observers, you all have to sit and meditate for 25 years. I don't think many scientists are going to do this. And you have to give up all your desires. And, I don't think most scientists are going to sign off on that. So it will always be a kind of a personal quest. But there has scientific aspects insofar as yoga will say, you can experience it. It's not just something you believe in and then you die and hope you put your money on the right belief. Not like that. Consistently, you can see God. We had it right at the top of this very page. And then you can perceive the Atman. Okay. This can be known, for it abides always within one's body. The 12, verse 12, we certainly know we're conscious. Yoga is going to say, and you can experience that consciousness as distinct from all material things. It's going to make a further claim, but the fact that we're conscious is going to deny that, right? What are you, unconscious? You'll be able to speak, and you might fall asleep in the middle of a lecture. But that doesn't mean you're unconscious. It just means that your consciousness kind of had enough and gets drowsy. But we know we're conscious. All right. So where are we? Higher than that, there is nothing to be known. It's God and the soul. What else is there to know? When the enjoyer discerns the objects of enjoyment and the impeller, so the enjoyer is the Atman. In ignorance, we are trying to enjoy the world, but we're still the enjoyer, and we discern the objects of enjoyer as matter, objects of enjoyment as matter, and the impeller. These are the three things it's been on about all along, the triad. When we know these things, that there's the world, which are really objects of the senses, objects of enjoyment, or objects of experience, we can say. That's probably a better word, because not everything is enjoyable, but everything is experienceable if it's made of matter. In some way we can experience it. Even black matter, we don't see it, but we sort of experience it by inferring it must exist as the only plausible explanation for things we do experience. So indirectly we experience it. So when the enjoyer, consciousness, without consciousness, there's no, how can there be enjoyment? There's no consciousness. The enjoyer discerns the object of enjoyment and the impeller, which is the term that's been used a couple of times, which sort of impels things, creates things, triggers things into action, sustains them. When one perceives that, everything has been taught. This is the threefold Brahman. And then we'll jump. Remember Om from the previous Upanishad. Again, Om pervades these texts. When one makes one's own body the bottom slab, right? When you make fire, you have a slab, you get the fire stick, you rub it, and then the spark comes out. So that's the metaphor. So the body is the bottom slab, and the syllable Om is the drill. Om, you chant it just like you revolve the stick, revolve, revolve, revolve. And from that, a spark is created in the metaphor by twirling it constantly through meditation, meaning repeating it. Om. So the sound is coming out and the mind is being absorbed in that sound. And because it's sort of revolving, it's like the twirling of the stick. So by twirling it constantly through meditation, one would see God just as one would see a hidden thing. Something could be hidden, something's hidden under the table, but you could lift up the table and find it. So the Atman is it's not unknowable. It's just absorbed in the body mind. So by meditation, we remove its absorption in the body mind, and then our consciousness becomes situated in its own nature. Like sesame oil in sesame seeds. The oil is in the seeds, but you have to make it come out. You have to crush the seeds, but the oil is actually in there. It just needs a process to bring it out. Olive oil, crush the olives. Olive oil is not floating about outside somewhere. It's in the olives. It just needs to be subject to a certain kind of treatment. So is yoga. What's the treatment? Meditation, chanting Om, for example, or Om, later we'll find developed mantras when God takes on more fuller presence of form, like Krishna and Shiva. Then we might say Om Namo Shivaya. We might add Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. But like oil in sesame seeds, like butter and curds, it's there. It needs to be separated. like water in the riverbed and fire in the fire drill. So when one seeks it with truth and austerity, you have to give up desires. What are desires? Desires are illusions in the mind that capture the attention of the mind. We're trying to redirect the mind to consciousness, so we don't want to direct it out into the realm of desires. Desires for things out there. So they externalize consciousness. We desire something out there. Our consciousness is sucked out. So, so austerity means to control the desires. Tapas could be a big word. Tapas, T-A-P-A-S, like the Spanish tapas. One grasps that self in the body, that all-pervading self, which is contained in the body, like butter and milk. Butter pervades milk, but you have to cook the milk, and out comes the butter. I made burfi 2 days ago. It was Radharani. For those of you that know anything, Krishna's beloved is Radharani. Bhakti tradition, that's relevant to our course, because Krishna is Ishvara, is Bhagavan, so he has a consort. The fact that we have gender is because God has gender. No, he's not bound by gender, but God manifests in these different forms, male and female as well. Why not? So his consort is Radharani. Her birthday was 2 days ago, Radhastami. So in India, and especially in the Krishna traditions in sort of Vrindavan area, which is Uttar Pradesh, near Delhi, that whole area, which is the whole area is devoted to Krishna because he was born there. And so the Radhastami is a huge festival 2 days ago. So everybody makes something special. So I made burfi. I made a special kind of burfi, which you won't find in India. I made raspberry burfi. So what do? You cook the milk, cook the milk, cook the milk. And it becomes thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. And eventually you left the burfi. Add some sweetener, put something in to flavor it. I put raspberries, you can put vanilla. So like that it's saying, right? Like the curd or ghee. What does it say? Like fire. What was the metaphor? I think milk and wherever it was, it doesn't matter. So that is Brahman. Oh, like butter and milk. There it is right there. It's in there. You have to just cook it. Make it come out. We'll churn it. That is Brahman, the highest object of the teachings on the Upanishads. Look, it's making a claim. Hidden connections, or the Upanishads. He translates this. Oliver comes up with this, I'm not sure if I agree with him. Upanishad does mean come and sit down. Certainly that's how tradition takes it. He takes it as hidden connections. And he does explain in the introduction why he does that. And it's been a while since I studied that. So, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But notice what it's saying. It's saying this triad of the God, the impeller, the soul, and matter is the highest teachings, highest objects of teachings on hidden connections. What's connecting things? Well, there's consciousness, connected to unconsciousness, connected to God who sustains everything. Right, here we have our first, and this is not a course on yoga, but just out of interest, this yoga that you find in the high street. How much time do we have? Oh, we're good. We've got another halfway through. When he keeps his body straight, this is the early yoga practice, actual meditation. If you're seeking Atman and you're seeking God, how do you go about doing it? And we'll be reading the Yoga Sutras later in the semester, so let's have a little look here at earliest expression of yoga. When he keeps his body straight, all those poses, by the way, that you do on the high street in your yoga classes, they're not meant to just, they're meant to train the body so we can sit straight for meditation. It's not meant just to give you a good body, then you can go out and find a partner or something, or go on the beach and, show off your pecs. So it's not meant for that, my friends. It's meant to, you can train your body so you can sit still, so you don't fidget, so you can meditate. Yoga is about meditating with the mind. Meditating on what? These things, what we've discussed, these truths, the Atman, not just meditating on them. You're meditating to experience them, not meditating on some theory or some concept. Meditation really means fixing the mind on Om, and eventually that consciousness manifests itself, reveals its pure nature. But here is the early form of yoga. When he keeps his body straight, 3 sections erect, draws the senses together with the mind into his heart, a wise man shall cross all the frightful rivers, the samsara, usually called an ocean, but here rivers, all these rivers of life, all these things that happen to us, they're frightful, terrifying. Could be hit by a car any moment. COVID can come, knock on your door, your loved ones. They're frightful rivers. With the boat consisting of that formulation, Brahman, that's Om. That's the formulation over here, the syllable Om. It's a formula, it's a mantra. Okay, so there we are. Where are we? Now we're, okay, here, compressing. I must have skipped the page. Oh no, I have to go to the next page. Here. Here we are. And now still, this is yoga. There's about 8 verses. Compressing his breaths in here. Part of yogic practice is stilling the breath, controlling the intake, the inhalation, exhalation. Curbing his movements. This is called pranayama, breath control. A man or woman should exhale through one nostril when his breath is exhausted. Right, just sort of, a wise man should keep his mind vigilantly under control. Actually, yoga means to stop all thinking altogether, not just to control it, first to control it, but then to actually stop any thoughts emerging in the mind and fixing the mind entirely on that divine sound Om. If you're a bhakta, then it would be Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya or Om Namo Shivaya. So up the mind in them means no other thought arises. So, you know, if a thought arises like, oh, I wonder if that person responded to my email I sent last night, you suppress that thought, you push it down. The thoughts will arise. That's the practice. It takes many years. And ultimately, the goal is to perceive the Atman, not just read about it and theorize about it, and perceive God. But before you get that far, even just on the way there, the mind becomes peaceful. So when in real life you get agitated, something happens, immediately you know by your practice in the morning, you're able to push it down, step back, realize how silly and you know, how foolish and many of our little traumas and dramas are. Meditation helps us to see them that way and step back from them. So anyway, and then here's the sort of place where you do yoga, level and clean, free of gravel, in noiseless running water. Remember, in the forest, you know, a nice place, pleasing to the mind, not offensive to the eye, and a cave or a nook. For, you know, for you, it might be a little corner of your room or a little room in the house. Shelter from the wind in such a spot. In other words, some place which not going to disturb your mind. That's sattvic, that's clean, that's has a nice vibe about it. To use the 1960s term, the vibe has a nice sort of aura about it. And then we'll jump down. We're still on yoga here. Lightness, health, yeah, you know, you're eating very little, absence of greed, bright complexion, pleasant voice, sweet smell, very little feces and urine. Why does it say that? Because the yogis are controlling how much you eat, not stuffing junk food in your face. It doesn't make you happy, it just makes you feel disgusted after you've finished. Doesn't it? You get a bag of, you know, smart, you know, popcorn. And you eat it, oh, so nice in the beginning. They keep going. At a certain point, it's like, I can't stand it anymore. So that reflects an inability to control the mind and the appetites and the desires. So yogis starts to control all this. This is the first working of yogic practice. The first, not the result. You have to start by meditating, freeing, you know, calming the mind, eating little. Just as a disc smeared with clay, once it is cleaned well, shines brightly, right? So we clean the Atman, clean the mind, and the Atman, pure consciousness shines forth, blissful, eternal. So also an embodied person, once he has perceived the true nature of the self, remember the goal is to perceive it. These texts are assuming that if we do the practices, we'll perceive it. It's just matter of fact. It doesn't take it as anything astonishing or different or unattainable. It presents it as if anyone could do it. So just as that's the case, you clean a disc and it's a beautiful gold disc. So also an embodied person, once he has perceived the true nature of the self, becomes solitary. Why solitary? Because all your bliss is coming from your own nature. You don't need to run around looking for happiness outside. And if you go outside, it's to help others, just out of kindness and compassion. And these are the great saints of the world traditions, the bodhisattvas of Buddhism, the Jiva Muktas, Jesus Christ, or you could add whatever you want to the list. They could be solitary, they're quite happy just to sit in their meditation and experience their own bliss. But if they go out into the world, it's not to run around looking for the latest flavor of that Ben and Jerry's, is it? It's to serve others. His goal attained, goal of life. We missed the goal, my friends. If we run around looking for sense pleasures, we missed the goal of life according to the Upaniṣad. And what do we get instead? Nothing. Just frustration, ever seeking, ever looking for new, latest. Never content. Ask yourselves, look at your own life. Don't take it, these Upanishads are presenting information. You process it, see if it's meaningful for you. We don't have to believe something just because it's written in a Sanskrit text 2,000 years ago. Why should we? It has to be real. His goal attained and free of sorrow. We're sorry. Why are we sorry? Because we're always craving for things. And then we're always sorry for what we lost. And we're sorry when things go wrong. Occasionally we have the odd happy moment. So we think, oh, I'm so happy. But then pretty soon, we're miserable again. It's not depressive. It's not cynical. It's not pessimistic. Yoga philosophy is going to say you have to realize life is suffering before you want to go somewhere else. Why would you seek this Atman if you were perfectly happy in your regular life? It wouldn't make sense. You only take some path if you want to go somewhere, which means you don't want to stay where you are. Yoga is for those who realized I'm always frustrated. That's not a pessimistic, negative thought. It is the first sign of wisdom, and we'll run into that and develop that idea more as we proceed. So when by means of the true nature of the self, which resembles a lamp, again, this luminosity metaphor, because what else are you going to say about it? You have to use the best examples that we're familiar with in our sphere of awareness in this material, in material things. So it's like a lamp. A man practicing yogic restraint, right? Restraining the senses, controlling desires. There's no yoga without controlling the desires. Sees here the true nature of Brahman. When sees here, right here, not die and in some next life in some heaven. No, here. It's repeated so many times. So it's free from the fetters. Remember, the fetters are we're bound to the reactions of actions we've performed. We're now fettered to their results. The minute you act, there's a fetter or a bond, karmic reaction. Because he has known God, unborn, unchanging, unsullied by all objects. There's the soul and there's God. Remember the triad. This God does pervade all quarters. He was born the first, that being metaphoric, of course, God is eternal. Yet he remains within the womb. Again, what does this mean? The womb of matter, the womb of nature. Let's not do this because I don't want to get into these more obscure verses, and there's going to be differences in how that's read. He who abides as God in the fire, who abides in the waters, and God pervading everything, right? There's like the sun kind of pervades everything, even though it's distinct. Who has entered every being, who abides in the plants, who abides in the trees. To that God, adoration, namaha, namaha. And here we have, who alone wielding the net, could be the net of karma. Later on, the metaphor of a net is used for karma, action, reaction. So we can maybe speculate that it meant the same thing in Upanishads. We can't be sure, but it seems like a very fair assumption, because early Buddhism talks about the net of karma, Indra's net. Well, they use it in a slightly different way. Okay, reigns by his sovereign powers, reigns over all worlds by his sovereign powers, who also alone is present at their rise and birth, right? Before the rise and birth of the universe, that one God is present. Those who know this become immortal. There is only one Rudra. There's the other name for Shiva. Hara we had earlier on, and now Rudra. He has not tolerated a second. This is hardcore monotheism. Not tolerated a second. Who would reign over these worlds by his sovereign powers? Only Shiva. After drawing in all beings at the end of each creative cosmic cycle, after drawing all beings, he stands as the protector at the end of time, turning west towards men. Eyes everywhere, face everywhere, arms everywhere, feet everywhere. He forges with his two hands. He forges with the wings, and so you can read on. Who is the source and origin of the gods with a little g? He's God with a big G. God, these little G's are just the celestial. Remember, we had Brahma with a long A, is the first of the gods. He's like the engineer. So Shiva is the origin of the gods, ruler over them. The god Rudra as the great seer. In the beginning created Hiranyagarbha, and later tradition takes Hiranyagarbha to be that Brahma that we read about in the, I think it was the Mundaka, or the previous class, four-headed. He's in the later tradition says this Hiranyagarbha is that Brahma. May he furnish us with lucid intelligence. Krishna says in the Gita, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tvam, I'll give you the intelligence to realize who you really are, and the faults and the flaws of being absorbed in this temporary world and seeking happiness in this world, the problems with that, the flaw in that kind of quest. Krishna says, I'll give you the intelligence to see that. So here, Shiva, same thing. May he furnish us with lucid intelligence, lucid, real deep, ultimate intelligence. Who are we ultimate? That form of yours, O Rudra, which is benign and not terrifying. So right here in the early text, we have a sense that Ishvara has a form, which is not sinister looking. But that most auspicious form of yours, O mountain dweller, look upon us. So later tradition is going to, clearly there were lots of stories that eventually surface in the Puranas, the main text of Hinduism, where we find the great stories of Hinduism. We don't know how all those stories are. Shiva meditating in the Himalaya mountains. Parvati, his wife, is the Giriraja, Kanya, the daughter of the mountain. These stories, we get the details in later texts, but we get references to them in this text. So there's every likelihood that those stories are ancient, but they just don't get recorded until the Puranas. The Puranas are another genre of text, just like the Upanishads and the Vedas. There's another genre of text, huge, 400,000 verses, 18 great Puranas. And that's where you get the stories of Ganesh and Shiva and all of these, the great deities of Hinduism. But the fact that they are written down and compiled by the 4th century doesn't mean that's when they were composed. They're ancient. We have no way of dating how old they are. So, but here we get references to them. The mountain dweller. That's a very specific reference. Look, the arrow, or mountain dweller, that you hold in your hand to shoot, make it benign, or mountain protector. Hurt not man or beast. Shiva typically, maybe in later some forms of Shiva, he's holding an arrow, but mostly he's later Hinduism depicts him as meditating. And on, okay? We get the sense of this monotheism. We have to jump around. Who is higher than that? Higher than Brahman, right? Really stressing the point that Shiva, the being, the personal God, is the highest truth. It's higher than Brahman, which is supposed to be the ultimate truth. So it's very strong monotheism, the immense one, hidden in all beings, and each according to its kind, and who alone encompasses the whole universe. When people know him as the Lord, they become immortal. And so on it goes. You'll read this for yourselves, my friends. You have to read the whole thing. And I just want to, we've only got 15 more minutes. Let's just scroll down and hit a couple of verses on the way towards the end. So we go down to 15. All right, here we are. The person has 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, and 1,000 feet. Later that becomes that's actually a hymn from the ancient Rig Veda. Sahasrashir Shah Purushaha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat Sabhumin Vishvato Vitva. It's chanted at ritual occasions. Purusha Shukla. I memorized the whole thing once. So it's 1,000 heads. Sahasrashir Shah Purushaha. The person has 1,000 heads. I've just said that in a chant, in the Sanskrit, in that chant. 1,000 eyes, 1,000 feet. This is being metaphoric, of course. The whole world is just, in other words, he's just infinite everywhere. The whole world is just the person, whatever there was and whatever there will be. And that doesn't mean there can't be actual forms with 1,000 heads. I mean, look at Krishna's form on the battlefield. Displays his form with infinite heads. So something doesn't need to be metaphoric. I mean, I can't say this is metaphoric. There are forms of Bhagavan. Bhagavan can manifest any form, and can manifest a form with 1,000 heads and 1,000 eyes. And Gita gives us an example of what that looks like. The whole world is just a person. Remember, Purusha. Whatever there was, whatever there will be. Even over immortality, he rules. Over the liberated, free, liberated Atmans. When he rises above the world through food, I don't know what, whatever that means. Okay, and on, with hands and feet everywhere, and so on. So let's keep going. And over here we have the same two birds who are companions and friends nestled on the same tree. We had that in the previous Upanishad. So sometimes the same motifs are repeated from in one Upanishad, sort of borrowed or taken from another. One of them eats a tasty fig. The other looks exactly the same. You can compare this to what we read the other day. I think it was 2 months ago. So one should recognize the illusory power as matter. We're trapped in matter. And what is the illusory power? We think we are these bodies. We think we're male, female, black, white, Hindu, Christian, Indian, American. The illusion. Atman is none of those things. Be a Hindu in this life. Maybe you were Sergeant Major in the British Army in the past life. Maybe Sergeant Major in the British Colonial Army in the past life is a Brahmin in a big temple in India this life. We don't know that. So there's illusion. We think we're these bodies, we're not. In whom this whole world comes together and dissolves, right? Just everything, the creation emanates out, and then it comes back into, it somehow is absorbed back into Ishvara. So, all right, so here we go. So who is the source and origin? Okay, it's repetitive, doesn't matter. Helps us internalize it better. Who is the source and origin of the gods? And the ruler over them all, that's the god Rudra, that's the great seer. Looked on as Hiranyagarbha was being born. You've seen the pictures of Brahma on the lotus. Some of you have seen this. The lotus growing out of the navel of Vishnu. Brahma is sitting on the lotus. So Vishnu's looking on. Ishvara is looking on. It's Shiva, but Shiva and Vishnu are one, just different forms of the same one. Who is the supreme lord of the gods, the little gods, the celestials, right? On whom the worlds rest, who rules over the bipeds and the quadrupeds here. To what god shall we offer oblations? Who else are we going to offer oblations to? It is he who protects the world at the right time, the Lord of the universe hidden in all things. Okay, when someone thus knows him, after whom seers and gods strive, he severs the fetters of death. That God, the maker of all, verse 17, the immense self, is always also residing in the hearts of people. When there was darkness, there was neither day nor night, neither existent nor non-existent. Sounds like the beginning of Genesis. Benign one alone was there. He was the imperishable. So he's the cause of all causes, the first entity before creation, before Big Bang. And so on, right? I'm just jumping around. He is the unborn one. He never is, himself is never born. So some man filled with awe takes refuge with Rudra. Take refuge of the Supreme Being. Protect me always with that kindly face of yours. All right, so let's go to the end. You keep reading this, my friends, because you will be responsible for it. And we have only 10 minutes left. And we'll go to chapter 6, and we end up same as we started off. Remember, some wise men say it is inherent nature. Like, what is the cause? Remember that first verse, beginning of the chapter. What is the cause of Brahman? I'm reading now the first verse, chapter 1, verse 1. I don't want to scroll back up. What is the cause of Brahman? Why were we born? By what do we live? And what are we established? Governed by whom, O you who know Brahman, do we live in pleasure and pain, each in our respective situation? That was the first verse. Very similar. I was tying it all up. He answers all those questions. All those questions were answered in these 5. Now he goes back to, like a good paper, you have your introduction, you have your data, and then you come back and you conclude. Some wise men say it is inherent nature. So there were differences of opinion. There were materialists back then, did not believe in God. Just said, look, it's just the nature of matter to come together, and forces pull particles together, and just by chance, it all comes together in this world. Some wise men say it's inherent nature, while others say it is time, all totally deluded. Now it's answering the first question. The first question is, well, what is it? Is it this? Is it that? Is it time? Is it inherent nature? So then we have all the five chapters. Chapter 6, it says all these other views, they're all deluded, all totally deluded. What is it then? It is rather the greatness of God, Ishvara, present in the world, by means of which this wheel of Brahman goes round. So here Brahman has been taken as the totality of everything, but then there's something, so Brahman is taken in a slightly different way than we found it so far, as the cause of all causes. Here, it is everything, but Shiva is beyond that. Who always encompasses this world, this whole world, the knower, the architect of time, the one without qualities, no material qualities, the all-knowing one. It is at his command at the work of creation. And what is that creation? To be conceived with earth, water, fire, air, and space. You can think of it that way: solids, liquids, gases, and so forth. But by his creation, it unfolds itself. After completing that work and drawing it back again, after joining himself with the realities, one after another, with one, with two, with three, or with eight. Okay, this could be anything. Prakriti could be one, the two could be Prakriti and Purusha, the three could be the three gunas, the eight are the eight primary evolutes, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. So different ways of understanding these numbers, but that would be probably the most normative one. So he creates all this and draws it back, as well as time, and with the subtle qualities of the body. Okay, so let's finish up. After we have first venerated that adorable God. So here's bhakti. Now, it's not just philosophical, metaphysical, establishing that God is the source of everything, but now there's more this emotional relationship with God, devotional relationship. And what's that? Veneration, adoring. Sounds like it would be Christianity. After we have first venerated that adorable God, displaying every form, the source of all beings, as also residing within one's heart, and then recognized him as the one who bestows righteousness and removes evil. Even to become purified, the bhakta, the devotee, surrenders to God as the Lord of prosperity, as abiding within ourselves. Remember, the sun ray is, in one sense, the sun does pervade the sun ray, even as the sun ray might be distinct. So that sort of thing. As the immortal residing in all beings. And we come to the end, my friends, over here. And we have how many minutes? We have 8 more minutes. There is no one in the world who is his master, nor anyone who rules over him. He has no distinguishing mark. He's beyond all marks. He is the cause, the overlord, over the overlords, right? Over the celestials. He has neither parent nor overlord. The one God who covers himself with things issuing from the primal source. From his own inherent nature, things issue forth. And here we have that metaphor again of the spider as a spider with the threads. Manifest the threads and suck them back in. And the threads are actually one with the spider, but distinct. It's a great metaphor. The threads, I don't know what biology would say, but there's some kind of substance in the, probably saliva, whatever biology would say about what a web is in terms of its metaphysics, but it emanates from the body of the spider. So you could say it's one with the spider, but the web in another way is not one with the spider, it's distinct. And when it's withdrawn, it remains in the body of the spider. So it's not a bad metaphor for the relationship of God to creation in many of these theistic traditions, such as this, Śvetāśvatara. So like a spider with the threads, may he procure us dissolution in Brahman. What does that mean, dissolution? Well, I'm sure Shankara would take it the way he wants to take it. You lose your individuality. But given everything that came before about the triad and the eternal difference, the eternally different, another way of taking that would be you enter into that realm. You somehow have this eternal connection with God even after you're liberated. Different traditions will envision that differently, but we're not ready to discuss that yet. He's the one controller of the many who are inactive, who makes a single seed manifold. Everything comes out of property. Property being matter, right? You've got to, hopefully, by repetition, you're becoming familiar with these terms. Property is matter. When a man knows that cause, which is to be comprehended through the application of Sankhya. Sankhya is a metaphysical school in ancient India. We will be reading arguments from non-theistic Sankhya, arguing against theism later on in the course. There was theistic schools of Sankhya and non-theistic schools. 5 minutes. Here we have the goose again, the one goose in the middle of the universe. He himself resides as fire within the ocean. Only when a man knows him does he pass beyond death. This is another strong statement. Many traditions are going to say, well, we just have to know your own Atman and you'll be liberated. This is saying you have to know God, not just your own Atman. You have to know God as well. Making an additional requirement for liberation from the bonds of karma, which result in birth and death and reincarnation. Look at this, very strong. There's no other path for getting there. Only devotion. Krishna will say that. Gita will, he'll make statements like that. Who at first created the Brahman. So here Brahman seems to be taken not as the cause of all causes, but as the totality of all things. We've had several references to Shiva being beyond Brahman, cause of Brahman. So the word Brahman seems to be taken a bit differently than other Upanishads, where Brahman itself is the cause of creation. We'll find that in Vedanta Sutra next week. The Brahman itself is the cause of creation. This verse is sort of hinting that Shiva is beyond even Brahman. Okay, so different schools are going to read that differently. So who first created Brahman, delivered to him the Vedas? And so this could be Brahma, actually. Ow! Bit. Who first created, this could be Brahma, right? The celestial being. You might want to take it that way, because Brahma does receive the Vedas from Ishvara. So that's, I'm sure, how later tradition would say. They wouldn't take it as Brahman in the neuter. They would take it as Brahma. But let's not worry about that. That's not something we need to excavate right now. Okay, let's finish up then. By the power of his austerities and by the power of the grace of God, the wise Śvetāśvatara, that's the name of the Upanishad, that is a person. So by the power of his Śvetāśvatara, by the power of his austerities, and by the grace of God, not just by his austerities. Down back here it says, look back here, let's go back down. Only when a man knows him does he pass beyond death. There's no other path to getting there, no other way. By the power of his austerities, by the grace of God, the wise Śvetāśvatara first came to know Brahman, and then proclaimed it to those who passed beyond their order of life. So he knew it himself, but he didn't just sit in a cave, he went out and shared it with others. So he's a Jivan Mukta, he's a great, compassionate being. So he passed it on as the highest means of purification that brings delight to the company of seers. He shared it with others. The supreme secret was proclaimed during a former age in the Vedanta, and we move into the Vedanta next week. So Vedanta is a synonym for Upanishads. The Upanishads themselves call themselves Vedanta, but they don't use the term very often, but they do. Here's an example. Look at this. One should never disclose it to a person who is not of a tranquil disposition, or who is not one's son or pupil. I might get in trouble. Do you all have tranquil dispositions? Make sure you do, otherwise I'm going to get. I'm forbidden to impart it. The teacher's forbidden to impart it to one who is not of a tranquil disposition. So don't get me in trouble, my friends. Only in a man, one more minute, who has the deepest love for God, and that's pure bhakti. Now we're talking about love. Last line, love. Remember, concluding statements carry the most weight. Now we're in the realm of bhakti that we'll encounter again in the Gita. Not just that there is a God and God is distinct, but now how do you actually relate to God with love? We'll save that for later in the course. So only a man who has the deepest love for God, who shows the same love towards his teacher as towards God. I don't mind that one. That's a nice one. We'll have to love your teacher. The guru, well, you see the role of the guru in Indian tradition, very prominent. Here we get a sense of it. The same love towards his teacher, towards God. Only by that, by this love, do these points declared by the Noble One shine forth. We may read them, but they're not going to shine forth. They're not going to actually reveal their wisdom unless we have love for God and love for the teacher. So that is it, my friends. That's the Śvetāśvatara that brings the Upanishadic portion of our course to an end. And I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you were inspired to take up your own study, continue the study of these wonderful texts. And we move on to Vedanta next week. So let's see how you do with that. A little bit more. Vedanta is now not metaphoric. It's much more systematic. Now we're in the realm of sort of more systematized, schematized intellectuality. So it's going to be a bit more rigorous, perhaps, but we'll work through it together. Okay. Have a great day or rest of the day.